Welcome back again to our Thursday evening Gita Satsang. And on this evening, we choose some stanzas from the Bhagavad Gita and we have a little discourse about them. And this week, I chose chapter 4. And for those of you who know the Gita a little bit, in chapter 4, Krishna describes the many ways in which truth seekers make offerings of sacrifice. And there's many stanzas where he says some people offer possessions as a sacrifice, as an offering. Others, they make offering of their actions or perhaps their thoughts, their breath. The inhalation is offered into the exhalation as a reference to Kriya. They offer their senses and so on. There's quite a few stanzas. And he comes to sloka number 440, which is something of a summation, or chapter 4, number 40. He says, all the above seekers understand the meaning of self-offering, yajna, or sacrifice, the inner fire which consumes all the seeds of karma. Here he's saying that we can offer ourselves through these various instruments of senses and so forth. And in a sense, we're symbolically offering up our senses, and in a sense, we're symbolically also dissipating our karma. And then he goes on into Sloka 41, he says, by eating the blessed food, prasad, left from these spiritual fire rituals, one attains Brahman. Even the blessings of this world come not to him who gives nothing of himself. How then can he hope for happiness in a better world? In other words, if it's the very essence of gaining happiness in the world means giving of ourselves, giving in some ways, and there's all the various ways. And of course, those various ways are dependent upon one's temperament, one's understanding, and there's various levels of all of that. But the essence of it is that sacrifice, yajna, offering, is essential for achieving any great gain in life. And I know Swami Kriyananda used to repeat often, he says, nothing great in this world, accomplishments is ever accomplished without tapasya, or without offerings, certainly. And I think this is something for us to keep in mind. And I think for me, the idea of making offering has been something that has been very helpful to me to come to an understanding of the spiritual path, understanding of the path of yoga, and understanding what we're doing, especially through the practice of Kriya Yoga. And I think most of you, if not all of you, are Kriya Bhans. And so I ask you to consider it in your own practice in this way. Now, I've probably many times, if those of you who know me, I've said it many times that I was not raised in a religious family at all. The opposite, you might even say. And so it's always been very difficult. It was a very difficult path for me to come to a path such as what Master's path and this path, which has devotion as such a essential element in Master speaking of God and integrating that. Now, culturally, of course, in India, I found it wonderful to be able to present when I finally went to India to talk about, because I could talk to God. But certainly the American culture in which I grew up in is it's a religious country, but it's not publicly expressed so much. It's considered somewhat, something you don't talk about publicly. And so I fit very nicely in as I was growing up, because I certainly didn't talk about God, nor did I believe in God. I didn't disbelieve, but I certainly had no, religious inclinations. And you could say when I came onto the spiritual path, as I started to explore, what is this all about? I was probably more attracted to Buddhism. And I remember Swami once saying about Buddhism, he says, Westerners especially are attracted to Buddhism because it promises enlightenment without having God. And I think it's a very astute observation. Whether one can attain enlightenment or not without some sense of God, I don't know. But certainly it expressed my orientation for that. And so consequently, reading I was very much unattracted to the devotional aspects, particularly theistic religion. It just didn't make any sense to me, and it just struck me as somewhat superstitious. I wouldn't say that, of course, but at the time, because I didn't want to offend anybody, but it just seemed that way to me. And so to my surprise, I found that I was reading the autobiography of a yogi and enjoying it. As a matter of fact, more than enjoying it, I was very much attracted to it, but I had a hard time overcoming that hurdle about devotion, God, and having that sort of a relationship with God. But because I felt the attraction of Yogananda, I could kind of put that on the side. And I says, well, I'm attracted to Yogananda. He's obviously a great guru. This other part of this, I don't know, that if I can accept that or not accept that. And I said, I'm just not even going to think about it. I'll just put it aside. But yet, you can't really put it far aside. But there was one aspect of it that I could understand. I didn't know, because Master was so personal in his relationship with Divine Mother. It's personal with his relationship to God. And I thought, how is that possible? What is he speaking about? And I wanted to know, but I was not going to be a hypocrite and start mimicking that just because Master was doing it, but without really believing it. And the thought occurred to me, and it remains with me. How can you love God if you don't know God? If you don't know something, what are you loving? And so I had no concept of how to love God. But as I said, I was very attracted to Master, very attracted to Kriya, and I says, I'll practice this, and I'll practice and see what comes. And I found that even there, and Master would say, and Swami was much the same way when he came to the spiritual path. He was actually brought up in a church tradition, but he was not particularly attracted to the way it was practiced. And so he had difficulties, and he was very intellectual. And Paramahansa Yogananda would tell him when he had him in the ashram, he said, get devotion. You must get devotion. You're so dry. And I noticed that in myself as well. Once I started practicing Kriya Yoga, I was very attracted to the technique. And you could say I worshiped the technique. But technique alone, and I think you will find this, technique alone becomes dry. And so I realized something was missing. But I came to the understanding, a little bit of devotion, God, is I could understand the concept of offering, self-offering, of sacrifice. That made sense to me because we have to give of ourselves. And I realized that there was a blockage within me, which is basically my sense of personality, my self-identity, my ego, all of this thing. And I realized I could intellectually understand that's a blockage. And I said, I don't know if there's a God. I don't, because I have not experienced it to that deep. I know there are godly things, but how God is, who God is, that's something I'm just going to have to experience first before I can profess it. And so I said, if I can, I realize that there is something in me that needs to be given away. And that's that sense of I-ness, that sense of ego, that sense of attachment to all these things of this world. And so the idea of sacrificing that. And when I studied it was, through Master's teachings and Swamiji's explanation, the idea here expressed in this 4th chapter, Krishna is talking about offering of oneself, my ignorance, my lack of knowledge, my lack of devotion. I could offer that And in that, and because I loved Kriya so much, I began to realize that Kriya is a technique by which we can offer ourselves up into the infinite, into that cosmic supremacy or whatever it is. I offer myself into that. And if devotion is needed, I knew the concept of prayer. I can pray. I was praying all the time, and I didn't realize it. God help me. I did phrase it so much, but when I came to Master, I began to say, Master, help me. I need help. I need help. And I prayed for that. And I said, give me devotion if devotion is needed. But I want to know. I don't just want to parrot something. Give me that knowledge. Give me that experience so that I could be sincere. And so this is, and I didn't understand it, but I knew I needed something, and I needed that love, that love. And slowly, we begin to have a more subtle, inspirational, intuitional understanding. But it's through this process of self-offering that became and is a devotional act in and of itself. That I could understand. I give myself to you, Lord, in faith that you hear my prayer. I serve thee. Whatever thee is, I had no idea. And I wonder, what is God? Let me experience. God, you must come to me. And that way I'll know. And I have faith enough because of the Guru to at least pray for devotion, and I have the hope that will be satisfied. And little by little, you begin to, in that vibration, begin to take in. Now, the question comes up, if I believe in sacrifice, in tapasya, in self-offering, but what is sacrifice really? It's not a highly popular word. It's because it implies a certain amount of, oh my God, tapasya, penance and all of these sort of things, or maybe something, if not physically painful, somewhat, painful to our will or on some level. But Swami, I came to an understanding that Swami explained it. And he said it like this. He says, a sacrifice involves, in the essence of sacrifice, is the giving up of other ways of directing our energy so that we can direct it in a better and higher way. So in other words, I have to sacrifice these bad habits so that I can do something good habits. In other words, you give up the lower for the higher. And so symbolically we sacrifice, we give some little token thing into the alms bucket. It's sacrifice. I'm giving that up to make room in my consciousness, symbolically in that way, for something higher. So you could say I'm sacrificing my old self for a new self. But I'm not just giving something up. What it is that I think the important part of that is the sacrifice is to give up something lower in order that you can make room and direct your energy to something higher. You see, it's not just the giving up, it's also directing to something higher. And help me change, Lord. Let me get rid of this so that I can do that. Let me give up the old and adopt the new. And this, if we think of it in this way, this is the spirit in which I incorporated into my Kriya practice. Now, it's something I'd recommend. With each breath, I'm giving up the old, Lord. I'm offering it up to you, my old self. And thereby, I'm sort of making room for thy light to come into me and to fill me. And this is the spirit. And that I recommend, and this is the way that I was able to then start developing a devotional attitude. And what is a devotional attitude? It's not chanting God's name mindlessly. Now that could be helpful, but some people are not disposed that way. It's the giving of our little self up into the higher self. And that I could understand. And I think, the worldly person, they go to the temple, they go to church, and there's somewhat of a mercantile approach, I think, to most people. And I used to be very, I saw that as somewhat hypocritical. People are, they're going and they're asking for blessings. They're making an exchange. Lord, I'll give you this and you give me that. And I say I used to be critical of that, but I learned. Actually, that's not. We see it all the time. We don't want to necessarily emulate that. But, I mean, somewhat we certainly do to some degree. And, when we're thinking, help me, Lord, they say there's no atheist when you're in a foxhole in a war, because you're impelled to call on God. But Swami clarified that. I remember when he said, no, don't criticize that. Yes, it's a lower form of worship, but don't criticize it, because at least doing that encourages people to think of God. Now, because I never particularly thought of God before I came on the spiritual path, it never occurred to me. But to at least think of God is better than not thinking at all. And so consequently, I thought, okay, that makes sense. But yet, it's not where we want to remain. We need to take it to a higher level. Higher sacrifice is to offer ourselves to God. Not necessarily in return for favors, but as a gift of our little self. Take this little self from me, God. Take it. And I guess you could say it's a little bit selfish there, because I want you to take it so that I could have you. I could have you. And I think God likes that, because we're thinking of him or her, the Divine Mother. I want you, Lord. I don't want these lower forms. And we put ourselves in God's hands, and that we might serve him. Let me understand you, because that way I would better able to serve you. If I know you, God, then I'll be able to worship you better. You see, but I want you, and I want to know you. I don't want to just parrot these phrases. And remember, the higher sacrifice is not, it's not about deprivation, or tapasya and sacrifice is not about deprivation or hardship or tapasya. Oh my God. And it's the giving, the pure giving of the little self as an act of love. It's joy. It's freedom. That's what it really is. True tapasya is freedom. Freedom of all those things that are holding me away. And it's said, Master, or at least Swami used to say, he says, God has everything in this world except that one thing. God doesn't have our love and will not force us to love God. We can't be forced. It's a free gift that we have to give. We have to give that love. But I've often thought, well, what is that? What is it? I don't know, but whatever it is, I want to give it to you, Lord. I want to give it. And he possesses everything, but that's the one thing. And to the degree I can, I want to give that. And so consequently, the question that would come up, is that really a sacrifice? The way we think of it traditionally, say, oh, it's a hardship. It's a hardship for me to give my love. Well, actually, I think sometimes it is hard to give our love to God, because there's in the back of our mind, maybe there's say, well, what if I give my love to God and, I have to give everything. But then we start thinking, I have to give that, and I have to give that, and oh my God, I got to give that. And so consequently, it can be a little bit daunting, and it takes a lot of, and this is why the spiritual path really, when we go on a deep level with it, it takes a lot of courage. I have to give up my attachments. Oh my God, I got to give up my desires. Oh my God, all of these things. But there comes a point, and I think this is the point that I think all of us as devotees want to reach. It's sort of a bittersweet point, because we realize, introspecting, we see all these attachments. I love those attachments. But I also know that they're holding me back. Have you ever felt that way? You kind of want to get rid of them, but you don't want to get rid of them. You're in betwixt and between. But we get ideally, and there are moments when we get to say, Lord, Take it all. I just want you. And I think to the degree that we can have just a little bit of experience, we have a little bit of touch of God's grace, God's blessings, that begins to grow. And this is, I think, what we, as devotees, as Kriya bonds, this is what we have to cultivate. Just cultivate that little bit of touch. And we'll find that then it's very addicting. We want more of it. We want more of it. And then we want to get rid of what's ever holding me back, Lord. Let me give that to you. And this is the best gift that we can offer is ultimately our ego. We offer our breath. We offer everything, all those attachments, all the things. We offer that in the practice of Kriya. So this is, my journey has been in Kriya, is to learn to use it as a daily ritual of self-offering. And this is what we do when we take the Kriya initiation, we throw all of those things symbolically into the fire, and we have to give them back. Divine Mother said will give us everything, all the toys that we want, but won't give us our love. It's the last thing, because as the song says, if I give you my love, I Divine Mother, I think it's a Bengali song, Swami used to sing it, where the Divine Mother says to the devotee, she says, ask me for anything, but don't ask me for my love, because if I give my love to you, I will become a beggar, and I will have nothing left to give. And that's the final thing that we all ultimately seek. And that's finally what's going to satisfy that deep, deep longing that's in our heart, to know God's love, to be able to express God's love. And so this is what we yearn for. But those things hold us back. But yet we have to start somewhere. So start small. Start with little things. Give little things and try to offer everything up into God. And think of it as a sacrifice if it's helpful. I'm giving this. I'm self-offering. And you'll find that little by little it begins to grow. A little bit experience, and you'll find even losing oneself and one's possessions in one's love for God, it's so sweet. And this is what we're after. I want to conclude by reading this. I think most of you are familiar with this. I got a reading here somewhere. It's about building, and I take this reading as building our faith in small ways. But it's this one of the readings from Tagore's book, Gitanjali, beautiful book, and it's number 50, and you've probably heard it before. I had gone a-begging from door to door in the village path, when thy golden chariot appeared in the distance like a gorgeous dream, and I wondered, who was the king of all kings? My hopes rose high, and methought my evil days were at an end, and I stood waiting for alms to be given unasked, and for wealth scattered on all sides in the dust. The chariot stopped where I stood. Thy glance fell on me, and thou camest down with a smile. I felt that the luck of my life had come at last. Then of a sudden thou didst hold out thy right hand and say, what hast thou to give to me? Ah, what a kingly jest was it to open my palm and to beg, and to a beggar to beg. I was confused and stood undecided, and then from my wallet I slowly took out the least little grain of corn and gave it to thee. But how great was my surprise when at the day's end I emptied my bag on the floor to find a little grain of gold among the poor heap. I bitterly wept and wished that I had had the heart to give thee my all. What a beautiful story. What a beautiful story. And this is, I think, the lesson that we learn little by little. We give a little to God, and God returns the favor multiple times. And we learn to give more. It takes courage to do that, and to have faith, and to take the words of the Guru to heart. Learn devotion, get devotion. If you don't have devotion, pray for devotion. And then with that devotion, there is no such thing as sacrifice in the sense of a negative sense. It's all self-offering. And that's a beautiful gift that we can give to God. And that's the gift that God wants of us, to give of ourselves to God. And God, in turn, returns that gift 1,000 times. Many blessings to all of you. Now we're going to have our arati, and I'd like to. How do we proceed now with arati? I can have the candle here, and I can hold the candle up to the light. I invite you to take the lights. Take it in as a blessing, that it purify you, give you the strength to face all challenges, all difficulties, and may your heart be blessed in this light. Om Guru. So let's raise our hands and let's send this blessing out into the world. Oh.